Welcome to Theme 2, Rights and Responsibilities of the AQA GCSE Citizenship course. In this session we're going to be looking at how laws protect the citizen and deal with criminals. In particular, how do we deal with those who commit crime? In the last video you would have looked at the key words to remember as well as the role of the CPS. In this video you're going to be looking at the purposes of punishment and what are the types of punishment. These are the purposes or aims of sentencing. Ultimately, this is what is expected to be achieved from certain types of punishments. Ensure you know these purposes, it is very important. Retribution. Please do not use the term revenge in your exams. Use the term retribution. I've only put this term here to help you understand what retribution means. Here is the definition of retribution. Society and the victims of a crime deserve to take revenge on the criminal. It is the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This gives society and the victims of the family a feeling of revenge. It is making the offender suffer and feel bad and pay for what they have done. Worse crimes receive harsher punishments. The death penalty is an example of retribution. It is used in some areas of the US, as well as China, Iran, and many other countries. People are usually put to death for multiple murders, the killing of a police officer, and extreme violent crimes. Forms of the death penalty include electric chair, gunshot, lethal injection, hanging, or stoning. Protection. Protection is the purpose of sentencing that involves the idea that society must be protected from dangerous criminals. They lose their freedom so others do not have to worry about their activities. The purposes of some punishments are to provide protection for society, which means the offender can no longer harm others and members of society can feel safe. Examples of these would be life sentences, keeping people imprisoned for their entire life because they are a threat and a danger to society and therefore society need to be protected from them. Rehabilitation, also known as reformation. This is another purpose or aim of sentencing. It involves a punishment that changes and reforms the criminal so they learn to be a useful and law-abiding member of society once they are released. This means helping the offender to see what they have done wrong and helping them to make the right decision to avoid doing it again. They should aim to be law-abiding citizens again. This form of punishment aims to change the criminal. This usually involves a program that they must follow. It may include community service to pay back to society. It may even involve meeting the victims they have hurt, e.g. during burglary cases. Opportunities to work, be trained, or have some form of education in prison are forms of rehabilitation and reformation, allowing those prisoners an opportunity to reform, learn from their mistakes, and possibly be law-abiding citizens once they leave prison. Deterrence. The purpose of this sentence involves harsh sentences and punishments that are given to deter, another word for put off, individuals from committing crimes when they see what happens to those who offend. A sentence may also be a deterrent to a criminal repeating the same offence. The purpose of this punishment can be seen when an individual is given a harsher sentence when they've committed an offence for the second time. A case study where we could see deterrence taking place was after the Tottenham riots, where many of the looters and rioters were given really harsh sentences that many said were not proportionate to the crime committed. However, this was a way that the legal system could deter others from committing riots in the future and preventing people getting involved in a riot if a riot does ever take place again. Reparation. This refers to the idea that the criminal should make good the damage and hurt they have caused. They might do community service where they carry out useful tasks for society. They repay the money they have stolen, apologise to their victim, or clean up graffiti. The idea is to help the criminal understand the effects of the crime. So this could be in response to if someone has vandalised or graffitied an area and they are required to clean this area up, be involved in a community service in this area to repair the damage they've done. Finally, the last purpose or aim of sentencing is punishment. This is where people must see that laws are upheld and respected. Those who break them should be punished to show society that justice will be upheld. It sets an example to others so they will not break the law. E.g. in some countries people cut off a thief's hands and feet to show others they should not steal, or sending a drug dealer to jail for a long time if they have reoffended. Please make sure you do know all of the 6 different purposes and aims of sentencing. It's very important that you know these. The Criminal Justice Act is a piece of legislation that outlines the purposes and the aims of sentencing here in the UK. It specifies these 5 purposes of sentencing here in the UK: protection, rehabilitation, deterrence, reparation, and punishment. So it's extremely important that you know these 5. and have an understanding that these are the purposes of sentencing that is identified in the Criminal Justice Act, showing us that these are the reasons why sentencing exists in the UK. So whilst it's important that you do know all 6, the most important of the 6 are the 5 that are highlighted. We've come to the end of this part of the session where we've looked at the purposes of punishments. We're now going to look at the types of punishments that exist. There are 2 different types of punishments. There are custodial sentences, which is a punishment that takes your freedom of liberty away, and there's non-custodial sentences, those punishments that don't take your freedom of liberty away. The difference between the 2 is specified in the keywords to remember part of this session. There are a range of different types of custodial sentences. Custodial sentences usually refer to prison time. So you have life sentence. A life sentence is carried out to ensure protection for the public from those usually found guilty of murder. A judge will set a minimum term before the offender can be considered for release by the parole board. So for example, for a murder involving a knife or other weapon, the starting point is 25 years, in that the judge will say that the minimum term before the offender can be considered for release is 25 years. However, it does not mean that this person is out in 25 years. They've got a life sentence. For murder, it's always a life sentence. This is just the minimum term that the offender has been given by the judge before they can even be considered for release. Rape and robbery are also offences where a life sentence can be issued, but in most serious cases. And this is down to the interpretation of the judge. In 2016, 59 people were serving a life sentence. Extended sentence is another type of custodial sentence. It provides extra public protection from the offender after their release. This is usually for a violent crime or sexual crimes where a life sentence is too high. So the person who serves a prison sentence can then be on a licence for up to a further 8 years. In 2016, 668 offenders were given an extended sentence. Determinate sentence. This is to punish the offender for the offence and to deter others from committing the same offence or crime. Prisoners do not always serve their full sentences, as they are allowed to serve some of their sentence in the community on licence. Offenders serving sentences of between 3 months and 4 years may also be eligible for release on a home detention curfew. This allows an offender to be released up to 135 days before their automatic release date. The offender will be electronically tagged and a curfew imposed. If the offender breaches the curfew, they can be recalled to prison. Their release date depends on their behaviour in prison, but they must complete at least half of their sentence in prison. For each of the different sentences, I've added additional information and some statistics. You do not need to know the statistics inside out. What you do need to know is the difference between these different sentences and how they're carried out. A suspended sentence. This is to punish the offender for the offence and to provide reparation to the victims. Remember what we meant by the term reparation. This is making good the damage one has done. So whilst it's done to provide punishment, it's also done to provide reparation to the victims and those affected by the offence. In some instances, it also provides rehabilitation. How is it carried out? If the court imposes a custodial sentence of between 14 days and 2 years, the judge can decide to suspend or delay the sentence for up to 2 years. The court will require the offender to undertake other tasks, such as doing unpaid work, being subject to a curfew, undertaking treatment regarding drugs or alcohol abuse, or being subject to a supervision order. Now let's move on to look at the non-custodial sentences. Firstly, we have fines. These are to punish offenders to ensure that they do not commit the offences again, a form of deterrence. Since March 2015, both magistrates' courts and Crown courts have powers to set unlimited fines. Community service. Why is it carried out? These sentences combine punishment with activities of reparation or even rehabilitation in some cases. It is carried out through various activities including unpaid work for up to 300 hours, undertaking a particular program to help change offending behaviour, prohibition from doing particular activities, adherence to a curfew, so the offender is required to be in a particular place at certain times, an exclusion requirement so that the offender is not allowed to go to particular places, a residence requirement so that the offender is obliged to live at a particular address, a foreign travel prohibition requirement, mental health treatment with the offender's consent, or a drug or alcohol rehabilitation requirement with the offender's consent. Where offenders are under 25, they may be required to go to a centre at specific times over the course of their sentence. Ancillary orders. This order is given in addition to another sentence and are aimed at redressing the harm caused by an offender. It's a form of reparation, whilst also aiming to prevent future reoffending, so a type of deterrence. This order is given in addition to another sentence. For example, an offender found guilty of causing death by dangerous driving must be given a custodial sentence and also given an ancillary order. e.g. disqualified from driving for a minimum of 2 years. Ancillary orders include criminal behaviour orders, compensation orders, confiscation orders, deprivation orders, disqualification from driving, drink banning orders, disqualification from being a company director, financial reporting order, football banning orders, forfeiture orders, parenting orders, restitution orders, restraining orders, serious crime prevention orders, and sexual harm prevention orders. So the key thing to remember about ancillary orders is that these are not given on their own. It's given alongside another sentence. And although this is a non-custodial sentence, it can still be given alongside a custodial sentence. Finally, discharge. These are to punish offenders and are given for less serious offences such as minor theft. The court may give an absolute discharge, which means it decides not to impose a punishment because the experience of going to court has been punishment enough. However, the offender still gets a criminal record. A conditional discharge can also be given. This means that if the offender commits another crime, they can be sentenced for the first offence and the new one. Please do look at the additional piece of information, which includes statistics, percentages, and general knowledge for your own interest. However, you do not need to know the additional information inside out. The key information you need to know about non-custodial and custodial sentences are examples of both types of sentences, why they're carried out, and how they're carried out. We've come to the end of this session where we've looked at the purposes of punishment as well as different types of punishments. In the next video, you're going to be looking at the role of the prison and whether they work. Within this, you'll have an opportunity to practice an 8-mark question.